This is Father Gregory Pine.
This is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Father Bonaventure.
I'm here.
So here we are in our 6th year of Godsplaining.
Yes.
And
6th year.
I think it's the 6th year.
That's probably right, yeah.
Yeah.
You're
What are
good
other
numbers.
things that you have done for 6 years or more?
Ooh. Lived.
Nice.
Gone to school.
Boated?
Well, it depends how you count 6 years, right?
Right, yeah.
I don't know if it's added up. Yeah.
That'd be awesome if you had spent 6 continuous years on a boat.
Yeah, it wouldn't be, though.
Okay,
Unless you really like boating. But that's like, I suppose, like a submariner.
A submariner. Nice, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, for those who are interested in the Mission Impossible universe, seems like the type of thing that one could do.
Oh.
Cool guy in the most recent one. He's got a mustache. Cool submariner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I have, let's see, been a Dominican,
Nice.
right? Priest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lover of toads.
And lover, well, that's...
Is lover of toads more like negative precept or positive precept? It's like thou shalt not love toads, or is it more like a you should love toads?
That's a good question. It's like, if you... Yeah, you must love God or you must not hate him. That's a good question. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
I think it's it feels like a positive precept.
Like, do you have to continually be acting out or actualizing your love of toads at every moment of every day? Even during like snack times and nap times?
No, I think it's only if you see them or have the possibility of seeing them.
Okay.
I think that's probably right.
Okay.
Yeah, it waits for them.
Nice. Well, this leads us right into our ad read for today.
It does.
Which is Exodus 90 is preparing or gearing up for their St. Michael's Lent. If you don't know what a St. Michael's Lent is, you're in good company, because neither did I up until about 5 minutes ago. So it's an ancient tradition practiced by St. Francis of Assisi, among others, and it's a 40-day journey that permits you to extend the Lenten life beyond its Lenten bounds. So a Lent in honor of St. Michael, which begins on August 15th and ends on Feast of the Archangels, September 29th. Actually, it was during his St. Michael's Lent that St. Francis of Assisi received the stigmata, so look out, surprises might be in store. This year, St. Michael's Lent will have Fathers Angelus and Innocent Montgomery as their spiritual guides, Franciscan Friars, the renewal from over there at Poco a Poco. So you can bop on over to exodus90.com to sign up for this second largest of seasonal challenges as a way by which to kickstart or jumpstart or boost start or come up with a compound word that ends in start your spiritual life. That's all I got.
Toad start.
Yeah,
Bingo.
Exactly. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of which, namely saints who had profound experiences of the love of God and knowledge of the cross.
Yes.
The subject for today's episode is Edith Stein, known sometimes by her religious name as Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross.
Yeah.
When you hear her name, when you see her face.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah, nice work. Well done. First thoughts. What do you think?
She's great. Yeah, I love her. She's one of the two, so I brought my picture I have some famous philosophers on my wall in my office at CUA.
Yep.
And she's one of I have 5 up there. 5. And she's one of the 2 Catholics up there.
Okay.
So I think she's great.
You got Crucius?
I got Crucius.
Kant?
And Kant. Yep. And R.G. Collingwood.
Nice.
So I got Anglican, 2 Lutherans, and then Descartes and Edith Stein.
Nice.
So they're my 2 Catholic ones up there.
That's awesome.
Great. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're related, of course, because she comes from the phenomenological tradition with Edmund Husserl and all that. But she's profoundly insightful and a good synthesizer of the Catholic and modern tradition. So I think she's a nice combination of modern accounts of philosophy. They're trained under the best of the best.
Yep.
Was the best student of Husserl. And yet at the same time is deeply Catholic. So there's a kind of Christian philosophy, that account of what it means to reason as a Christian, to take in real principles as true, and then see what these kind of do to the philosophical life. She's always a beginner, like Husserl was. So not a dogmatist, but rather kind of continuing to stay close to things. And yet at the same time also a profound spiritual writer. She wrote a book, Science of the Cross. She was asked for the 400th anniversary of St. John of the Cross. She was a Carmelite, and so she was asked by her Mother Superior to write a book on this, and she wrote this unintelligible book to anyone, I'm sure, in her convent. It's a beautiful book, Science of the Cross, but it's Kreuzwissenschaft, but it's about as intelligible as that name. And it's cool, but man, she's a philosopher's philosopher. So she's a great philosopher, but also attentive to what it means to be a person.
Yep.
The personality stuff is super important to her, both philosophically and I think socially and psychologically. Teacher of women, and a Dominican high school-ish, I guess we'd call it that, the training school. So profound.
Well, yeah. So now that people have a basic appreciation, now that their interest is piqued, maybe we can go to the beginning of her life, recount some biographical details, and then you can lead us through some of the key, not takeaways is a crass way to frame it, but some of the key insights in her philosophical work.
Yeah.
So she was born in Breslau,
Breslau.
which is in southwestern Poland at present.
Yep.
But as people know, the history/frontiers of Poland has admitted for much change.
It ebbs and flows.
It ebbs and flows. So
Pressure at the time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So at the time, she was born in what we would consider Germany,
Yeah.
but at present, it's within the bounds of Poland. The current name of said town is Wrocław, but it's got like a W and then like the L with the
the L
slashy
slash
and then
thing.
like the C with the cool thing.
Yeah.
So she was born in October of 1891. So you can think like Saint Therese of Lisieux was still alive.
Yeah.
She was born to a Jewish family on the feast of Yom Kippur, or on the
Oh, I
celebration
didn't
of
know
Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement,
Yeah.
which when you think about the end of her life,
Yes.
there's a certain fittingness to that. But she introduced a great joy into her family and was also a source of suffering for her family when she converted to Catholicism.
Yeah.
They never quite understood it, especially her mother.
Yes.
And that was a source of sorrow for her. She went to the University of Breslau to study German and history in 1911. But there she got involved in a variety of issues, including women's issues. She was like a suffragette, but eventually transferred to the University of Göttingen to study under Edmund Husserl in 1913. So
Yeah.
she was his, like you said, best student pupil, teaching assistant. She did his doctorate under him. The big kind of tagline for the Phenomenological School is like back to things themselves. Zurück zum Sachen selbst. But she also, in this circle, met Max Scheler, which was an initial encouragement to maybe inquire further after Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, and Adolf Reinach and
Exactly.
Hedwig Conrad Martius.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So during World War I, her studies were interrupted. She served in a field hospital for a time, but then eventually went back to Göttingen, and then she wrote her doctorate, finished it in 1917 on the problem of empathy, which we'll hear more on later. Various experiences of faith which prompted her to consider Roman Catholicism more deeply, some of which are simple. So she recounts this story where she saw a woman in the midst of her daily chores or her daily errands bop into the cathedral in Frankfurt, kneel down, say a prayer, and then leave. And she was arrested by this. The fact that like conversation with God was something that could happen in the midst of a day.
Yeah.
And then Adolf Reinach's wife apparently had a big impact on her. But like reading St. Teresa of Avila's autobiography work, like that for her was the kind of tolle et lege moment where she said, this is true.
Yeah, one night she read it. She was over at the Martius, Conrad Martius household, and they brought her something. And she just grabbed up this book of Teresa of Avila's life, right? And reads this thing in one sitting. And at the end of it says, this is truth. And that was really the kind of the final piece. So totally like Augustine. So I have like what I call the Edith Stein challenge, and I want to take this summer.
Nice.
And
Just
I
like
have
start
a
at
little
11
thing on the
p.m.
door. Start, I don't know, she's probably 7. And it's a long book, you know,
is.
it's like 350 pages, right?
Yeah.
So like to go through it and just see if, what it's like, and see at the end of it, it's like, this is truth, or like, I'm exhausted. To see what happens at the end of that.
Both end.
Probably both.
Yeah, why'd choose?
Yeah.
So she was baptized on January 1st, 1922, which in the old calendar is the Feast of the Lord's Circumcision. So a cool little fulfillment there.
Look at that.
In the sense that our Lord comes to fulfill the law, not to suppress it. And then, like pretty shortly thereafter, she wanted to become a Carmelite, but she was discouraged by some of her mentors, and so she spent like the next decade teaching at this Dominican sister school. She wanted to be a professor. That was not available to her on account of the fact that she was a woman, on account of the fact that she came of Jewish heritage, on account of the fact that she just didn't have the opportunities. But she eventually accepted a lectureship position in the Roman Catholic division at an institute associated with the University of Munster. But it was after that that she entered the Carmelite monastery in Cologne. Made her solemn profession. But then she was moved to the monastery in Echt in 1938 in the province of Limburg in what is contemporary, it's present Netherlands, because of the increasing Nazi threat. So with a sense then for her setting in life, let's talk a little bit about some of her contributions. I don't know if I pronounced that word right. Contributions?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Contributions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was praying the Rosary yesterday, and I fell asleep kneeling.
Yes.
And I realized that I had fallen asleep kneeling because one of the brothers in front of me turned around because I was muttering nonsense.
Yeah.
But like, it happens when I sleep. It happens when I wake.
It happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
It happens on a plane.
Yeah, exactly. So, apropos of green eggs and ham, what do you think some of the ways in which people could begin to encounter Edith Stein in her writings, or some of the themes that they could draw forth from?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say philosophically, I suppose, is the Husserl point about phenomenology. So phenomenology is the tradition that Husserl starts ish in the 1901 with logical investigations, these accounts to get back to things themselves, as you said. At this point in German philosophy, we're kind of coming out of the idealist phase, you could say, where it's kind of everything's in the mind, with Hegel and with Kant and this sort of thing. And Husserl was originally a mathematician, and so does a lot of work in mathematics, but as he's trying to think of what mathematical objects are in logic, he also has this awakening to the structures of the mind that are always going out to something. This is called intentionality, so that the mind is always thinking about something. It always has a content and an inhalt. And that his focus then on phenomenology is, well, look at what those things are that it's always directed to. So it's a sort of account of getting out of the mind. We've been in it for a while in German philosophy, and it's attentiveness to the things out there. Right? It means a very detailed attention to the fine-grained kind of experiences of life, but experiences of actually what's happening, what's presenting themselves to you.
Like disclosure.
Like
how things disclose themselves.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So
that's Sokolowski.
Monsignor Sokolowski is a Husserl scholar and just has great work on this. And so you have the kind of disclosure, but also then the agents of truth, that your job is to figure out what is actually out there. But it's a sense of that, again, you have the essences, you have natures of things out there in the world, and you care about those experiences. And what this does is set up a school of phenomenologists that say, like, hey, we can actually study the experience of those things to get better at those things. And Edith Stein jumps in on this camp. Of course, Heidegger is a famous student. The two of them are together. It's interesting to compare the two of them. But Edith Stein develops her, as you said, her doctoral dissertation is on empathy. It's published as a book on empathy, which you can get. It's quite nice. It's also an introduction if you want to get into phenomenology. She does methodology at the start, and it's a great little introduction to what a phenomenological analysis. Phenomenological is the appearing of things, the phenomenon. Her case in there is to focus on how empathy is not just like a feeling state, but rather a cognitive intentional state. So that what she says is, when we feel things, one, there can be appropriate and inappropriate feelings based on what the things and the situations are. And two, that all of our feelings are not just like sort of, inner tingles that have no relation to the actual object, but rather are appropriate intentional responses to the object, that nothing comes neutral to us. So it's a really fine-grained analysis and detail of what it means to actually feel about something, so to see someone, or something, and to be scared of it or excited about it, this kind of stuff. And that's what phenomenology, philosophy in general, is about, making tight distinctions that people don't see otherwise. But phenomenology is like getting really into the actual experience of things. What it ends up giving her is this beautiful account of what it means to be as a human interacting with other humans, that we actually perceive and experience humans according to not only sort of, you could say, a psychological model of floating minds, but rather embodied persons and agents that are loving us or hating us or avoiding us or this kind of thing. So it's really a rich account. You can see where her notion of teaching and psychological development comes in here. But that's the first thing to say, the phenomenology stuff and the counting of the things, but especially the emotional. You'd expect this given her a consistent idea that women have a particular attentiveness to the emotional states of other people, but not as like, negative things like emotions as opposed to reason, but rather like empathetic or emotive understandings of reason.
Yeah. Now, we did an episode on whether souls have genders.
Oh, yeah.
And in that episode, we relied on the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas and Edith Stein, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. And we made we made cursory judgments or cursory descriptions and then cursory judgments about some of her essays on women, but this might be an appropriate place in which to introduce that. So we said that she was into women's issues. She describes herself as a suffragette, and that she was also encouraged to lecture somewhat extensively on the issue in the language world to which she pertained. And in those essays, which are collected in one of ICS Publications' volumes of her writings, you get some key insights as to what it means to be a woman, and by comparison, what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to like introduce some of the metaphysical concepts first.
Fair enough. So usually she goes from the psychology to the metaphysics.
Okay.
And so she has a sense of that men and women, because of this phenomenology stuff, they kind of experience, one, their bodies differently. They have different bodies. Two, they experience their bodies differently. Women have a closeness to their bodies because of the notion of being mothers and such. Men have a little bit less, you could say, closeness to it. They're more abstract, you could say. Also, they experience the world differently. So men traditionally experience or attempt at objects and things, and women are more attentive to the persons. The empathy thing shows up in here. She then says, well, how do we explain this? What are we going to ground this in? Is this a contingent kind of reality? Like, could we swap this? Could men become more attached to their bodies and close to their bodies and more empathetic and person-centered, and women become more? And she says, and it's a little bit some moving around, but it seems like she thinks it's an essential matter. So she's in the, although some people call her a feminist and such, and she's doing women's issues, she's an essentialist. She thinks there's an essential difference metaphysically between men and women, which has more than to just do with their bodies, but rather with what she would say their souls, right? Their essences that constitute and structure their experiences. So she takes a harder stand, you could say, or a deeper kind of analysis, and it cuts a little bit deeper at gender going into the essence, actually, at the soul level. Whatever we make of that, it's the sense of actually there's a metaphysical grounding to men and women, and then she sees this working out in the sense that men have particular vocations to be fathers and providers, and women have the vocation to be a spouse and a mother. Now, these structure. Now, not everyone, of course, she was not a mother, a biological mother, right? Nor a spouse, right? But she still says these are kind of essential features of womanhood, just like malehood or masculinity has its own essential features that needed to be taken account of in a society, in a family, in one's own life. Even though there are different types of how that masculinity and femininity goes through, nonetheless, we're either masculine or feminine at the deep essential level of us, and that then structures how we get along in society and with others.
Yeah. Yeah, I was recently evaluating or sitting on a board for a thesis defense about masculinity and femininity, and this individual was relying on the work of Walter Ong and of John Bishop, whom we've had on the podcast, saying like men kind of are dyadically differentiated or competitively differentiated, tend to a kind of externality or tend to comport themselves as if expendable, and then comparing this to what's distinctive about women. But I thought the point about internality as experiencing a world within, not alienated from one's body, but also which gives one a sensitivity to the world within others. One of the things that I really love in her essays on women is that it pertains to the woman's vocation to adduce the vocation of another. Like her privileged access to the interior life is in the service of maturation. And you can think about like a mother and her children, that she sees in them what they don't see in themselves, or at least not yet. And she's able to call that forth. Yeah. Like obviously there are sinful kind of fallen expressions of this desire, which you can kind of get in there to tinker or to manipulate or to control, which would be bad. But the idea is that you have access in part to help with maturation. Or to help this individual attain to his or her maturity, which I think is beautiful.
Well, I think it's also a reflection of her. So this womanhood issue, in the sense of the interiority, in the sense of the particular, right? Men, she has this, and these are all general categories you could say, but she thinks men have more of the universal. They're always going to the abstract. They're doing this kind of thing, but women have the sense of the particularity, the concrete kind of situations and such, because the person is concrete, the physical attachment, but also brings out a kind of aspect of her philosophical count, which is a focus on individuality, right? Because she has, I take it, part of this attentiveness to the concrete and the particular, she's inclined to recognize that each thing has its own kind of, she talks about its own kind of essence, its own kind of Wesen, right? And so when Husserl has this attempt to figure out what essences are in phenomenology, is to get a grasp at the nature of things through this perception, he's still thinking about the kind of generic essences, the essence of a toad in general, or the essence of a triangle, if he's doing mathematics, or an essence of what it might be. Whereas she has this more radical doctrine. She gets it from, she finds it later in the Scotistic tradition of the essence of the individual. She has a sense that the person is at the center. Part of this, I think, is also because she's taking notions of the Trinity and the personality of the Trinity, the persons of the Trinity, that are, in a sense, one nature but three persons. But she has a sense that every individual she has this claim that every individual has its own core that then is unfolded, and Faltun is the word, it blossoms forward or doesn't, depending on how life is lived. And she gets this also from the interior, kind of that Teresa of Avila interior castle, right? This kind of the fact of going inside to oneself and going deeper in oneself. So although she starts with this phenomenology account of looking at surfaces, looking at things there, she has her philosophical reflection is on this interiority, which has that each individual has its own kind of fundamental core that is developed or not developed through actions and through choices and through wills and through decisions. And you get a sense that this is like a mother watching the individual children. Mothers care about, they see each one of their children individually, know them so well and so detailed in a fashion. Not that fathers don't always remember birthdays and these kind of stuff, but there's a metaphysical mothering of being in her, this sense of the individual and being attentive to the particularities of the person and that depth there that I think is profound and gets worked out as she grows older and she keeps going on developing her work from the kind of phenomenology at the start to women's issues to then full-on metaphysics that ends in her final work, the Finite and Eternal Being kind of stuff. But that's profound. It's all connected to this interiority and this kind of womanhood notion.
Okay, so we have time for maybe one more theme, whether from Finite and Eternal Being or from the Science of the Cross or from something that you think merits consideration. But if you had to identify one more thing about Edith Stein or her doctrine that merits commentary, what do you think? You could also say no.
Yeah, I don't. We talked a little about finite. I guess the finite and eternal being point is good. Let's talk about that. Although the Science of the Cross is beautiful, just so complex though. But it's beautiful. We'll talk about the finite and eternal being. This is an account of the unity of being across things, like sort of experience, but rather there's an eternal being, this is God, and then, of course, the finite beings as we are. This is in contrast to, say, Martin Heidegger, who has being and time, this is kind of Sein und Zeit, his metaphysical kind of magnum opus, which talks about all being as being finite being. Right, so she's with him the whole time. She's a student with him. She knows him, this sort of thing, and he's developing this account of being as being a finite kind of thing that we just sit in the world, and there's fallenness and all this kind of stuff, and you just hope for the best, and maybe there's a God who will save us at some point, but who knows about, because we don't know anything about being. And she has this other side, which is that actually, although we are finite beings, being is not finite, right? Rather, being is eternal being fundamentally, and that it is a being that is intelligible and wants us to know about ourselves and about it, which is, of course, as we'll see, the Spirit, which is God, the Trinity, this kind of thing. So it's nice to, I think we've just started to kind of deal with Edith Stein, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, in philosophical terms again, just kind of had this renewed scholarship working on her right now with Robert McNamara and Sarah Bowden-Sharkey. There's a lot of work being done now, but I think it'll be interesting to compare her and Heidegger on the issue of metaphysics, on the count of is being fundamentally finite and we're just left with ourselves, leading to Sartre and kind of existentialism, or does being open up to the infinite, the eternal being that has something for us and it calls us. She has this, again, it's being essentially has this personal core to it, such that the Bestimmung, the vocation, the call, is something that is given to us. And she thematizes this, I think, beautifully in that work. So I would say that contrast to Heidegger, given his history is interesting on that too, of course. Mm-hmm. But there we are.
Good now. Okay, so then maybe just we could say a final word about the end of her life.
Yeah.
In a certain sense, each of our teaching is maybe proven or borne out by our mode of living. Or not. Maybe there's some decoupling there, but you find in her case that is true, or that is told forth after having thought and written about the vocation of a woman. You see a kind of nobility and a kind of courage which characterizes the end of her days. So she, the Dutch bishops wrote a letter condemning Nazi practices, upon which the Nazis responded by seeking out and detaining and eventually killing Christians of Jewish extraction, among whom she was numbered. So like we said, she had been in Cologne, but then she was moved to a Carmelite monastery in Echt in Limburg in what is now the Netherlands. And her sister, her blood sister, was there also, Rosa, not as a Carmelite, but as like a kind of lay cooperator. And they came for both of them on August 2nd, 1942. Yeah. And apparently, Edith Stein said, or St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross says, like, come, we are going for our people. And I guess there's some debate as to who our people are there, but it would seem the most straightforward reading would be the Jewish people, with whom she continued to identify to the end of her days. She was taken to a first transit camp and then a second transit camp, Westerbork transit camp. And the accounts testify that, like many people there, had just kind of lost their minds. They had gone crazy by virtue of their terror and grief, which is obviously to be understood. But she described like her vocation in that camp as kind of coming to term or coming to full fruition. She said, so far, I prayed and worked. From now on, I will work and pray. There's one of like the men who was there at the camp who testified to the fact that she was calm and composed throughout. And while like various mothers had kind of abandoned their children to their fate because they themselves were wholly overwrought with their grief, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross was tending to the children. Like she was mothering like these children whose mothers had kind of abandoned them. She wrote a note to her prioress from Westerbork Transit Camp asking for the next volume of the breviary so that she can continue with her daily prayers. And then she says, by way of sign-off, so far I've been able to pray gloriously. They were from Westerbork. They were loaded onto trains and taken to Auschwitz. She passed through the region around Breslau, and specifically at the stop at Schifferstadt, she saw on the train platform one of her former students. And she asked her student to give a message to the sisters. And she said, tell them I'm going to the east, which obviously as far as like concrete details go isn't especially helpful. But when you think about the fact that east is where the garden lies, where Christ returns from, the place of the movement of the celestial spheres, she's going to heaven, please God. And then, when she arrived at Auschwitz, she was summarily executed.
Yeah, it was very quick.
Yeah. So there's not much testimony from that.
It's not like Maximilian Kolbe where you have a cell. You can go to with the candle and this sort of thing. She was actually executed on the larger, so this Auschwitz II, over across the street, a little bit far from where Maximilian Kolbe was. But we have
just taken to a gas chamber and killed with prussic acid. Yeah. But even there, the guards who unloaded her from the train again testified to her calm and her composure. She was the only one, they said, who did not appear completely crazed.
Yeah.
There's something
and they're waiting when John Paul, of course, canonized her in 2000
something.
But when to come, or beatification, I suppose, when you would come out with the colors. Is that when you'd come out it's 93, I think. But whether it would be red or white, right? And he chose red. To martyr for the faith, and in a sense, for her people too. Leaving that ambiguous.
And he said of her that she was a true daughter of Israel.
Yeah, but I have this. I remember, this. So that in the Science of the Cross, when you read this, but I have these. She collects these quotes from some of it, from St. John of the Cross, and I've always noticed that this one is beautiful. The crucified Christ should be enough to satisfy you. Suffer and rest with him. Without him, have neither suffering nor rest. For that, free yourself from all exterior things and from all interior peculiarities. Which says, if you desire to possess Christ, never seek him without the cross. All right, so this kind of St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, she really embraced it, in a deep way, in this profound way. She's a witness to us because we don't usually get saint philosophers anymore. You generally don't have this, like St. Thomas Aquinas, Blessed Duns Scotus, and those sort of things. Medieval, St. Bonaventure, you had more of this. But St. Robert Bellarmine, maybe, some like philosopher, I don't know. But we haven't had it for a while. So her first, and then St. John Paul II, of course. Yeah. So maybe to be a saint philosopher today, you have to be a phenomenologist. I guess that's the lesson.
Seems that way. Yeah. And from contemporary Poland.
Oh my gosh, contemporary. Yeah, this is tough. So all you listening out there, if you have a shot, because Father Greg and I, we don't have it, but get to contemporary Poland and be born there.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Father Bonaventure, and thanks to you, the listener, for tuning into this episode of Godsplaining. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't yet, and on YouTube, be sure to press the bell and get sweet notifications when other things happen. If you follow the links in the description or show notes, you can shop Godsplaining merch. You can donate to the podcast through Patreon, for which we're super grateful. And you can see about upcoming Godsplaining events. This isn't actually on our event page, But there's another Dominican event that you might want to attend, namely the Dominican Rosary Pilgrimage, which takes place at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception on September 27th of this year. So this is our third annual, and you can expect a day of good preaching, good praying, and good chatting with all your Dominican friends. So we'll have 2 conferences and then opportunities for confession and adoration, recitation of the Rosary together. There'll be a vigil mass to conclude the day. And then is there a concert at the end? There's a concert at the end. Let's go. Okay, so I hope to see you there. And if not, hope to see you at the next opportunity, wherever it is. So know of our prayers for you. Please pray for us, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next time on Godsplaining. Father Bonaventure, would you prefer to have a bearded dragon or a chameleon?
Bearded dragon.
All right. Would you prefer that bearded dragon be 2 feet long or 4 feet long?
A chameleon.
Would you prefer that your chameleonic bearded dragon be in a tank or roaming free in your room?
Subscribing to Godsplaining.